Hello, how are you? My name is Pastor Nzuki. I'm here to discuss with you the Trans-Saharan trade. I'm here to discuss with you the Trans-Saharan trade and how it transitioned or how it gave birth to the transatlantic trade. So something you should know is that the Trans-Saharan trade and the transatlantic trade were two significant trading systems that shaped the history and the development of Africa and beyond. So, question number one, what is the Trans-Saharan trade? And this is the answer. Trans-Saharan trade was an Asian trade network. Mark the word network. It was an Asian trade network that connected the sub-Saharan Africa to the northern Africa and the Mediterranean world. So if you know the Sahara Desert is majorly across the bigger part of West Africa, being connected to the northern part of Africa, and now it linked now to the Mediterranean world. And this trade, it began in 8th century and continued until the 17th century. And the key commodities which were traded were gold, which came from West Africa and sold from North Africa, with ivory and slaves. And the trade routes crossed the vast Sahara Desert, and they were facilitated by the camel caravans and it linked major trading centers such as Timbuktu and Gao and Tijene, which were the major trading centers majorly in the present Mali, Ghana, Niger, those countries. And what was the impact of the Trans-Saharan trade? Number one, it had an impact of economic growth because the trade brought wealth and prosperity to the West African empires like Ghana, Mali, Songhai, and these empires controlled and trusted the trade routes, accumulating significant wealth. Also, these empires provided a security for the caravans. So it was also a win-win. It was a win-win situation, and also it led to cultural exchange because the Trans-Saharan trade, it facilitated the spread of Islam and Islamic culture in West Africa because scholars, architects, and traders from northern Africa and the Middle East brought new ideas and technologies and cultural practices. This is the reason, because of this trade, even to date, the Sub-Saharan Africa, yes, you'll find that all those countries and the northern Africa, all those countries are Islam by religion, and the culture of the Arabs got so much spread around that time. And also, it led to urbanization because the wealth generated from trade led to the growth of major cities and trading hubs, which became centers of learning and culture. So that is we are learning now. You have an understanding of the Trans-Saharan trade, which lasted until the 17th century. Why? Because we know that in the 15th century there was arrival of the European explorers, and the demand for slaves was so high, and so now this led to the transition from Trans-Saharan trade to the transatlantic trade, because now business as in now trade was shifting, not business but trade was shifting from the sub-Saharan from the Saharan desert to the sea or to the ports, because now these explorers came through the sea and major routes were discovered which connected the West Africa to the Mediterranean world. And there were some factors which led to this shifting from Trans-Saharan to the transatlantic trade. Number one is factor number one is that the European exploration and colonization. We know that European powers, particularly Portugal and Spain, began exploring the West African coast in search of new trade routes and resources. This led to the establishment of coastal trading ports, hence bringing a shift from Trans-Saharan trade to the transatlantic trade. Factor number two, there was a demand for labor in America or by the Americans. The colonization of the Americas created a massive demand for labor to work on plantations growing sugar, tobacco, and later cotton. This demand could not be met by the indigenous population, leading Europeans to turn to Africa for slaves. And also there was another reason. There was shift in trade routes. So now the routes are shifting from the desert to the sea. And in this one, as European demand for African slaves grew, the focus of the slaves trade shifted from the Sahara to the Atlantic coast. The coastal regions in the West Africa became major centers for the capture and export of the slaves. And there was another one. Yes, also another factor is that there was economic incentives. What does this mean? It means that the transatlantic slave trade became highly profitable for European traders and African intermediaries. African rulers and merchants who had previously engaged in the Trans-Saharan trade adopted or adapted to the new demand by capturing and selling slaves to the European traders. And also during this time, there was technological advancements there was advances in navigation and shipbuilding, which made the transoceanic voyages more feasible, allowing for the large-scale transportation of slaves across. Yes. And so this transition from Trans-Saharan to the transatlantic trade, what impact, or as in what were the impact of this transition? And number one, there was economic disruption, because the towns and the cities along the Trans-Saharan area which benefited from trade, there was nothing more now coming in. Number two is that there was cultural and social changes. Now with the slave trade, it led to significant cultural exchange and the development of new cultural identities among the African diaspora in the America. That's why today we have the black Americans as one of the indigenous populations in America. Next one is that there was a long-term consequences. There were long-term consequences because the legacy of the slave trade had lasting effects on African societies, contributing to the economic and development and social fragmentation. Majorly, what we should know that the transatlantic trade, it was majorly known as the transatlantic forced slave trade. So when we mention the transatlantic trade, we majorly mean the slave trade, which led to different. Which led to different challenges, which are felt even to date. Yes. So, as we continue learning, I would like to know, what have you learned from this topic of the Trans-Saharan trade, which transitioned to the transatlantic slave trade? Thank you so much.